Hi, I am Brent Feldman, and we're back with another episode of Mix and Matchbox. I am joined today by Blair Bryant Nichols. He is the owner of BBN Creative Management. Hi, Blair. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much for being on the podcast. Looking forward to getting into some questions here. You have very sort of interesting, sort of like set of experiences. But I saw that you started at the National Endowment for the Arts, and then also had an experience at the Gail Ross Literary Agency too. What was it about these experiences that helped propel your career to kind of get you where you're at today?
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting since you're highlighting two of my early internships in college, and to be honest, since I went to undergrad in Washington D.C. and by sophomore year, I had kind of had an inkling that maybe publishing was something I was interested in because I was a lit major and I didn't really know what other kind of career I had in mind. I had thought I was going to be a lawyer, so by the time I had shifted over to lit and was trying to imagine what I might do with it, I had an opportunity. One of my professors introduced me to the National Endowment for the Arts. So it was cool to be in one of the only government organizations, dedicated directly to giving funds. And in the literature department, is one of the only ones to give to individuals, so individual authors and writers and stuff. And some of those same writers that were awardees than when the year that I was there are, still publishing, and it's kind of cool to kind of trace my at least the beginnings of my career back to that, just working in the old post office that is now in a hotel in DC. But Gail Ross was like, one of the only lit agents in DC, and she still is one of the most prominent lit agents. So that was another side of the industry. I found her website, and I was like going into my senior year of college, and I just reached out and kept telling them I wanted to be an intern. And I don't know, since it's not New York where there's, dozens of lit agencies, I don't know how many opportunities and people they had reaching out very often. So they finally said, sure, fine, you're gonna be an intern. And so I interned for her for most of my senior year, and learned a lot about the industry and learned what I didn't want to do. So I was able to even go off to New York after college and know, I probably don't want to be a lit agent or an editor where a lot of my job is reviewing manuscripts. So I kind of got to filter through a few different sides of the publishing industry before I ever really began a real career in the publishing industry, which is what kind of brought me right into the speaking industry. So from, kind of a niche to a niche, it allowed me to look at, wherever I'm at, what are the opportunities that are most aligned to what I'm interested in? And then, okay, so if there aren't a ton of opportunities in DC, then obviously it's maybe not going to be the best city for me to start my career. Maybe I need, I made the choice and, assumption, the safe bet that New York was going to had more opportunities. So that's where I began my career and spent some time there before, moved on to other places.
That's really cool. Actually, this is kind of a connected question to the Gail Ross Literary Agency, only because I saw that you were reviewing unsolicited work, things that I guess weren't being asked for, quote unquote.
Right.
Did you notice that work being either different, better, or worse than the ones that were being requested?
Yeah, and this is kind of all agencies work a little bit differently, but it's traditional that a lot of agencies, are the clearinghouse for authors, and the first step is trying to get an agent's attention. And if you don't already have those connections, you might send your manuscript or your proposal off to a lot of them. So my job as the intern was to quote unquote read all of these proposals, or letters or things that we received, and basically write them a polite, like, thank you but no thank you letter, so they at least received some record of correspondence from us. But I had discretion to read if I wanted to. I mean, I had to get through them and do as and stay on top of them. But there were a few that definitely caught my attention, and there was one that I even asked and received the full manuscript, and was working on, getting one of there was like two agents that worked under Gail at the time. And so was working on like having one of them really read it and maybe like get an opinion on if they wanted to speak with the author, etc. And throughout this whole time, I wasn't really communicating a lot with the author because I got the manuscript and I didn't really know what to do. So I followed my instincts. And then when I did follow up with her just to check in, she let me know that someone else had signed her. So I said, well, I guess that my instincts were right on that one because someone else found value in that. And I don't know if the book ever got published or just the title changed or it kind of evaded me from there. But it was interesting, but then that also taught me, it's like, wow, I plucked one out of like a needle in a haystack and I still couldn't get anyone's attention, and then someone else snapped it up. So I mean, like that's how it goes.
Yeah.
And that's how a lot of lit agents start out. They have to go through and maybe they find some diamonds in the rough, and that's how they get some of their first clients. And but for me, it just it seemed like, okay, not really what is as exciting to me. Where I started my career was always where people had already published their books, and so we were getting to know about them as they were gearing up for their publicity. And so then we would take over basically after the publicity, because after no one's pitching you anymore for media, then but if there are speaking engagements, I started off in the HarperCollins Speakers Bureau as just the first publishing house to have its own in-house speakers bureau, really just as an opportunity to provide this service to authors, but obviously to continue to sell and promote their books. So, for us, it wasn't as much of an agency as an in-house service. So it was a little lower stakes, but still there was, 3 people in our department for an entire massive publishing house publishing dozens of books every year. So, we had to start to filter, who is going to be actually good in this market, had to learn that market and be the, kind of the in-house experts to say, yeah, this book would be really great, on the speaking circuit. And there's a lot of great books, but that doesn't mean all the books or their authors are going to be paid speakers. And there's just not always a paid audience. That's why people write books, because people buy books instead of go and see people talk about these things. Or, it's just, there are people who demand, an audience, and people in books and authors that could obviously translate to the corporate world or the university space. But we had to learn more about that. So I guess in some ways, just starting from the beginning, even in the lit agency, just having to hone my own, sense of taste, kind of understand, as much as I can, kind of what's happening in the market and what might be marketable, and use that to sift through, often in many, many roles, like lots and lots of talent, or talent that's incoming that wants to be represented or that wants to be, worked with, and how to, really pick and choose like who's worth your time. And that's ultimately kind of what led me to more of wanting to be a manager, which we don't need to skip all the steps, but being a manager now and being a coach, I really get to choose who I work with, and I get to be as creative and as, expansive in my advice with them as possible. We're not only talking about brokering paid speaking engagements, we're talking about the strategies all around that and how it impacts your business and everything else. And so I think I've just gotten to kind of take all the experience from the early internships onward and hopefully just continue to add it to my toolbox. I haven't really shed anything because I've stayed pretty close to this industry throughout my different, pivots, and just added more to it.
Yeah, it's cool. It seems like there's a lot of connection points, which is really neat. So that is cool though. I guess you have spent a lot of time, even before, right now in your kind of current organization, working with managing, growing, speaking talent. What are some of those steps that you could even just broadly identify of bringing somebody from being a good speaker to a great one?
Yeah, I love this question. Well, there's a few different elements to that. I think on one hand, it's just the quality of the speaker in general, and I think everyone can always get better. You can improve your presentation style. You might start off as someone who's used to maybe presenting at work or presenting on a specific topic, but you're not really delivering a keynote speech. You're really just coming and delivering information, and that can be as creative and as engaging as you want, but that might be what some people consider a good speaker. But the people who are getting paid big stages to they talk about their books or talk about their share their methodology that applies to these big broad audiences, and it's not just siloed to one specific topic area. They're not just one type of subject matter expert. They are connecting to those audiences through storytelling. They're delivering more in their presentations of that connection and that those feelings that then also relate to knowledge transfer and value transfer. So I think in some regard, there's a growth that happens with speakers when they can they might start in a niche and they can rise above it to be more impactful, influential, broadening their idea and making it more universal so that it can really apply to a lot of audiences. And that's what gives them a lot more opportunities to speak. I think in a lot of my work, I focus a lot more on like first getting that right, and like what's that positioning and what's your value differentiator, and how are you really going to stand out when there's so many people out there who want to speak now. There's less gatekeepers. You don't have to be a published author from a major publishing house or even have a book at all to be hired as a speaker. You can put yourself on YouTube. You can put a beautiful website together without ever setting foot on a stage. So there's a lot less barriers to entry, which just means there's a lot more competition. Mm-hmm. So I help people figure out like what makes them special and how do we put that forward to catch people's attention, and then how do we relate that to their topic. And so that's all about like building your platform. So you might be like a good speaker, but not a lot of people know about you. So how do we elevate you as a speaker? But that might mean like very adjacent things. Maybe it's the success of your business, that maybe it's associated with a brand, but that's not associated with your name. So how do we bridge those two things? Maybe you're great on Instagram, and so we're going to really double down on that and leverage that to like kind of get more opportunities around speaking so that we can build more of that. Maybe we need to focus on LinkedIn. So kind of figuring out both the strengths and weaknesses to grow that platform, because ultimately to be a great speaker, successful speaker, means you have a lot of inbound demand. That's where you can leverage. That's where you're going to make the most money, when people are coming to you, and where you're going to be able to get the most impact from that. So all of that side of it. And then now the element that, I think is where I differentiate myself from most speaker managers or agents is, what's your business strategy around all this? We saw in 2020, a lot of people were going to make hundreds of thousands of dollars on speaking, and it went away overnight. Mm-hmm. And they don't have other things to prop up, that lifestyle. They got to that point, and, like that to me was like a big wake up call. Obviously, I experienced it. My colleagues experienced it. We all experienced it in different capacities. And there's been a lot of people who've been really intentional about having other products and services, having other things that is supported by their speaking, that they're, that are around their speaking. And so I really help people figure out what is their real business strategy. Having both a B2C and a B2B strategy for most speakers is something they haven't really considered. And it's something that they're leaving money on the table, and they're continuing to commit to a very volatile market, a very up and down. Some months you might be booked a lot, some months not. And some speakers are more blessed than others, but that can change the next year. It's a pretty small industry. People get tired of booking the same people, and the people who book the speakers want new talent. So as a speaker, you have to be refreshing and igniting new content and reinventing yourself in some ways to stay relevant if you want to stay in the industry. So all of that to say, the great speakers are kind of doing it all, like they're bridging these things, they're building their platform and their awareness and their brand so that they're just more known. And every time they're out there, they're figuring out better ways to maximize those opportunities, whether it's getting these audiences to, sign up just for a simple email list that can then market digital courses that can ladder up to workshops and coaching and all these sorts of other opportunities, or simply get them into big corporate for big, consulting opportunities. But at all, then like those three things making a great speaker, those are like the three bottom parts. And then to make a real 4D pyramid is really, what are your goals? Like what do you want to do with it? I could tell you all day long what you could do and what the different options are and how, but it really doesn't matter if it's something you don't want to do.
Hmm.
So getting clear first of all too, is what would you want to do with speaking if you were speaking more, or what is it already doing for you that you want to do more with, etc. Just getting kind of clarity from my clients or from the people that I coach or manage on, okay, well, we can build a strategy, but the strategy is going somewhere. So I need you to be very clear on like what's in your heart, like what would you want to be spending your time doing. You're only going to be on stage so many times. Like it's a real fallacy to think that like, you're going to be on stage like, 90% of your even work hours. Think
Yeah.
about it. Like as a speaker, even if you have 100 gigs, that's 100 hours on stage in a
Yeah.
year. In a year, that's 3 work weeks for
Wow.
most people. Like most of your time is not spent doing the thing that you love or think you love so much. So you got to build other things around it that like keep it going, and that can also, drive revenue when things are slow.
That's cool. I mean, it's kind of helping people really start to think about it like a business as opposed to just like, oh, it's like a thing I love, or and I appreciate you characterizing it, that it's multi-step in terms of like, you can be a great speaker, but it's about growing their platform, the awareness, their, opportunity that they have with it. That's cool that it's very broad. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So, maybe a chunkier answer than you wanted, but good to great is, it's a leap, it's a chasm.
Yeah, yeah. No, I appreciate that. And I feel like, that's the kind of help that I feel like people probably could use. They maybe even getting into it, they don't even understand how big or broad it is, and what they might need to do to be really successful.
Totally.
But I guess, do you or do people have to make it, to the upper echelons of, desirability, or asked to speak globally in order to be considered a success in public speaking? Or what, do you help your, clients help them visualize as success? I know you talked about goals, but like, what does success really mean?
Yeah, well, I think part of like success and redefining success is about understanding your goals and what is important to you, and being more grateful for the opportunities than always striving to compare yourself to, the bigger speaker or the bigger person. I mean, living in LA, it's easy to compare to kind of Hollywood, and like, are you successful if you're a working actor, but like you can still go to the mall and not get stopped for your autograph? Or are you only successful if you're paid $20 million and have won an Oscar and all these things? Like a lot of people have been very successful in business and have been very, profitable to be able to provide for their families, but they're not billionaires. So I love this question, because I do think there is this kind of perception of like, well, if I'm not a best-selling author, and if I'm not if I'm not Tony Robbins, or if I'm not that person, then I'm not going to, like, what's the point? Like, I'm always going to be like lesser than. But I know so many speakers who've been doing it for decades, earning 15, 20K a gig, which is considered kind of mid-market, which is obviously sounds great, huh? And you're doing it those fairly frequently. Maybe they're never going to be famous, but they are successful because they've maintained a business and they've grown a business and they've got repeat clients. And so it does kind of come back to your goals. Like if your goal is like, wow, I really want to see if I could get like a New York Times best-selling book and get my fees up into the 30 to 50K range. And wouldn't it be great if I could keynote this event, that? Great. Goals are great. Like they give you targets to shoot for, but I don't think that you're only a success if you're at the top. I think you're a success if you're like, wow, this is enabling me to do what I set out to do. I grew my company. I'm growing my company. I've sold X number of books. I've gotten to do this. I've impacted this many people. So yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people who get into this type of business are probably ego driven in some regard, and they probably don't always find themselves satisfied with where they're at. But that's more of a them problem. I think there's in this industry, there's tons of space, and honestly, like a lot of love and affection for the people who've been doing it for a long time. And maybe they are like more mid-market with their fees, because working with those people who are in demand and hot and all that, like that's stressful. You might not get them to say yes to your offer all the time because they're booked already, or it makes for a different dynamic. So there's space in this industry for all different types of speakers. I think especially we learned that in the pandemic with so many virtual opportunities popping up, and now virtual is always going to be a thing. I mean, not all of us are only going to attend virtual events anymore, thank goodness, but
Yeah.
they're still going to exist, and there's still demand for that. And now there's, just in a different kind of demand for the in-person experiences.
That's neat. You already touched on storytelling, as being a part of like, kind of like speaking. But I know that it's very important to like, how a speaker kind of presents, how they tell their story, how they get their point across, how they, as you mentioned, deliver information. But, is there a through line between types of stories that, that hit, versus the ones that you're like, that's just, or is it really just in the delivery? Is it,
No, I think it's great. I mean, it's both, right? I mean, when I'm talking about opening and closing with a story, I'm talking about emotional resonance, right? Like making an emotional connection. So what I coach a lot of my clients on, like telling one of your own stories, because sometimes it's like easy to talk about a famous person or a famous leader or use an example that people are aware of or whatnot. But it's a lot harder to talk about maybe, something vulnerable from your own experience. But that's really what we're looking for in this. What we're looking for when you want an audience to really, go with you, and when you want them not to just, understand and absorb what you're saying, but actually connect with you and remember and have, that lasting impact. It's that emotional connection that you start with, and how you bring them in, how you like bring them into a moment and make them feel connected to you, whether you are, being vulnerable or just sharing a very, intense moment. And the delivery then can aid in that a lot. Like how you deliver that can obviously create an emotionally charged atmosphere. But I think it's less about delivery, and it's so much more about authenticity right now, and that's what people want. If you're not the biggest, most flashy presenter, but you're genuine, and they can feel like they can tell you're authentic, and like that one way of expressing that is through, storytelling and vulnerability and all this. That's what wins. And so if you begin that way and you end that way, like they're going to remember you a lot more. Like you're going to stand out. Like if you want to drive them to action, you've got them in the palm of your hand. So that's really, again, what separates like, good speakers from great speakers, because good speakers might come out and be really articulate, but they launch right into their topic, and they really don't leave any room to connect other than just hopefully like get their points across. And they're almost like, invisible to their topic.
Yeah.
If you want to stand out as a speaker, they got to remember you as much as what you've shared with them.
Definitely. That's cool. That's definitely that's a point. I'm gonna melt on that one. That's neat. Well, I guess you have a large focus on basically making speaking truly a part of business strategy. And I feel like that's cool. And what about this versus, speaking as this, sort of discipline as a, strategy for business versus advertising or PR, do you think makes it better for exposure and as you maybe just touched on, connection? Like what makes speaking so powerful as a business strategy?
Yeah, perfect. And definitely PR, advertising. Like if my clients can do all of it, like it's all good. It's not like, one is definitely better than the other. But I think when it comes to speaking as a business growth strategy, especially if you are in a business that requires you to get in front of decision makers, whether you're a coach or consultant or even just any service provider, and you can figure out where those ideal clients are, and you can go and get in front of them. Think about you interacting with an ad more than interacting with a person. Like it's easy to ignore an ad. Yeah, you might use advertising to, if you're very specific in how you're going to get your niche market through ads, because the internet allows us to do that, then that might be a strategy. But you also understand, there is going to be a paid transaction. It's going to cost you up front, and it's going to take some time before you start to see the results of that. You could go and do a lunch and learn and get a client that day and immediately, be generating revenue. So the fastest path to generating cash is often like being right in front of the people who can say yes that day and write you a check or whatever transaction you prefer. But that's just why, as like getting started, it's the fastest, I think, most efficient, if it's the right fit for what you're trying to do. But oftentimes people will, try to pour so much money into PR or advertising, and you never know if it's getting in front of your target market. You don't always know, like, if it's making an impact. Like I said, I think it all helps and it all matters. But I think when you take advertising and you take PR and then you personally retarget it at your target clients, because it just makes you look more credible and more everything else. So
Yeah.
I think the real magic is in what you do directly in front of those people, and the other stuff just kind of helps, build all your credibility around you.
Absolutely. I had actually just talked to John McDonald, and he's a UX expert and just like, released a book. But he was saying that, there was a company that was interested, and he did this like speaking engagement. And boy, like, they were like, oh, yep, where do we sign? Like, and that's cool, because it's that interaction. It's being able to like, see that person, hear their ideas live from them, as opposed to just, seeing it down on paper, seeing it on a website, seeing it somewhere else. So that's great. So you touched on a little, but I know that speaking can be lucrative, and I'm just curious. You had mentioned, that mid-market speakers can make X dollars per sort of engagement, but what does pay the most? Like, is it private corporate ones? Is it like big keynote events at conferences? Like, what are those things that like people are really sort of like finding the most dollar value out of the engagement in?
Yeah, I mean, I think the corporate events can obviously pay a lot, because they determine what budget they want to spend, and they'll spend a lot on celebrities, and they'll spend what they need to spend if it's someone that they really want. Obviously universities have less budgets, and conferences, if they're driven by like companies or whatnot, they often can have pretty big budgets. But they'll have big budgets for like a few of their like headliners, and then they might have very small budgets for everyone else, because everyone else is just getting the PR of being part of that event. So it's all a mixed bag, but I'd say, if you're Microsoft or if you're Google or whatever, like you can throw big events and pay people whatever they need to be paid, and software companies and tech companies tend to do that. Financial services, obviously the people with money are the people who can afford speakers. Pharmaceuticals, they have a big workforce. All these companies where it's heavy in sales, heavy in training, heavy in one-on-one relationships, those are the people like we're talking about that are most impacted by being spoken to one-on-one, because they have to do that really well in their business too. So I guess it's not really like a big surprise, like where the money in speaking is, but it can be quite varied. I mean, every industry has an association. There's all different types of organizations and different types of events, and lots of different ways that you can fit your business or model into it, even if like a traditional keynote might not be the right thing. It might be a workshop, it might be something else. But if there's a way that you can be in front of your ideal clients, when we talk about this, like ideal client, ideal event type idea as well, if you're a yoga instructor or like someone that helps people like relieve stress, don't go to like the California yoga instructor conference where everyone's kind of speaking the same language. Go to the stressed out financial planner conference and do a session on this stuff. Like, so finding your ideal client is literally about finding your ideal clients, not going to where everyone else is like you, and they appreciate what you do, but you're really not going to grow a business if, you know, they're all doing the same thing. So it just depends on what your strategy is, I guess, and what your goals are.
Oh, that's such good advice, though. It always makes me remember the lesson of like the Ed Sheeran thing, where Ed Sheeran started out he wasn't playing like the open mic nights and stuff. He would go to the comedy stand up, and he would go and play guitar in front of like all the people who were there for stand up. And yeah, he stood out. I like that idea of like you have to differentiate a little bit, and you can't just be part of a mix of a homogenous group. If you can stand out and make yourself known amongst the people who you're really trying to get your information to, don't just align yourself with what seems so, straightforward.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and just as long as you can relate it to them, like you said, like that's the key thing. And that might mean starting niche. It might mean only talking to a certain sector so that you can kind of prove like this is your focus. This is really your specialty and your expertise. Maybe you come out of, an industry, but now you want to like be a consultant to that industry or something. So there's ways that you can then make it a little less overwhelming by doing things like that. I think starting small, like, okay, I'm going to focus on real estate for right now on those events, like look for those types of clients and see how that goes. And then you can kind of add to your portfolio. So there's a lot of different ways to think about ideal clients. And then you hear a lot though from people like, I could speak to anyone, or anyone's really an ideal client. And like, no, that's not gonna help you. And that's gonna keep you from taking action. That's gonna hold you back. Like narrow it down, start there, and then grow beyond. Otherwise you're gonna be boiling the ocean.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, I guess along with, speaking, comes like, presenting, and I know that you work with celebrities too. And they might come to the table with acting ability. But maybe not necessarily speaking, presenting, sort of ability. Is that something where those people are more moldable in order to get them to be, or is there some sort of path that you take them along in a journey in order to get from being somebody who can speak in one capacity but maybe doesn't have the skills to get to the other?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I mean it's definitely interesting. And when I thought about, moving from New York to LA, or just like what my career might be, I never really imagined myself working with like actors and actresses or being a manager in that regard or in whatnot. So it has always been kind of, there are some celebrities who really want to speak, who are really good at it. And then others who, might be asked to speak quite often and who don't love it as much and who maybe aren't as good as it, and they might tend to do more like fireside chats. So if you set it up more as an interview, oftentimes it's a better experience for everyone anyway. It just feels more casual. It really can be unique and custom to the event. And then the audience, if that's what the format is, can also potentially participate, and then it just opens that up even more. But truly, yeah, there are some who are really great. I think a lot of celebrities or actors or actresses will do a teleprompter if it's something like they're asked to do, like a speech, like, of course, at an award show or whatnot. But in our industry, no, the expectation is people are not reading. There's no teleprompters. Even if you have some notes or whatnot, like you're not really expected to read. So, for the celebrities that I work with, or, because I've had not great experiences in the past, just booking other people's talent, and because they want a specific celebrity, or they want a celebrity that's tied to their cause, or someone that, and those people might not necessarily be like, the greatest speakers, but they, have other ways that they can go about it. So I think it's just about setting expectations more with the client and the meeting planner about what this person is willing to do, really what their limitations may be, and what's going to create the best experience for their event, more than trying to mold the talent into it. If the talent really wants to speak, I would talk to them about the necessity for delivering it in this way. And a lot of them probably would choose to almost rehearse, memorize, but that can come out naturally as long as they're not reading, like, and then in that way they choose to perform it however they choose to perform it. But yeah, it can definitely, like in my early days, I had to learn the hard way, like, oh, don't just let anyone like book people, like, oh yeah, want this person's available, sure, let's book them. It's like, no, you also have to think about what the result of this may be. And like, luckily there's so many great talented speakers who are so eager and grateful for work, and they always do a great job, and they show up and they do amazing, and you don't have to worry about them. And we get very lucky as managers and agents in that regard, because they want to get booked again. They want to keep the engine running, but then there's some that aren't. And if we're not, on top of that, any issues that a speaker or talent may pose, then, that hurts our reputation. So it doesn't really behoove you to just want to push any celebrity, or a lot of your work is also like trying to say, hey, yeah, I know it would be great to have this person at your event, but I don't think it's going to be the experience you think it's going to be, or this is why it's not going to be as good as if you have this person who wants to be there, is going to over deliver, and ultimately your audience is going to be much better off.
Yeah. Wow. I appreciate the discretion and intentionality. I feel like that's cool in order to be able to recognize things like that. But also on the other side of really the coaching to somebody who maybe not cut out for a particular type of speaking, or just maybe, can find a passion in a different type of, setting, like a fireside chat or a panel or something like that, where it's maybe a thing more suited towards how they can, sort of give, better. So that's cool. I like understanding that from both sides. So I guess like diverse and purpose-driven messaging. I know it seems to be that there's quite a bit of it now, and I feel like that is a good strategy in a way, but it seems like people want to naturally hear from diverse speakers, diverse talent, on diverse issues. But why is it doing so well right now? Is it just a point in time where these are hot issues and they can be brought to the fold? Is it because people are wanting to be exposed to things? What are the things that are making these sort of diverse and purpose-driven things more impactful now than they were before?
Yeah, I love it. I think it's a lot to do with the millennials becoming older, becoming more of the decision makers, and just the generation Gen Z coming into the workplace. And I think as things change culturally, they change in the markets across the board. So my biggest mission all along has been, when I was growing up in the industry, like diversity, if you were a person of color, it'd be like, oh, put them in the diversity category. And that would be like the catch-all. And it was just kind of absurd. And then like the big leadership speakers were all white men. And then the big other types of speakers were all white men. And so the people who got paid the most were usually, very homogenous. So and part of my mission and my management has been, representing women, people of color, LGBT, because because I know that they're underrepresented in all these categories, but also because people do want diverse voices in all categories. So my speakers don't all speak about diversity. In fact, I don't think any of them talk about DEI or inclusivity as just their only topic. They all are experts in other areas. They just are diverse when you look at the grand scheme of who the other speakers might be in that topic. So that's what I think people really want. They do want diverse voices, and they want it in all sectors, and they want it in all areas of conversation, so that there can be representation in all these different conversations. So it's not just a certain type of person in tech, or just a certain person talking about sales over here, or only diverse people can talk about diversity too. We need white people and straight people talking about diversity just as much as we need, everyone talking about the future of work and AI and its impact, and imposter syndrome and burnout, and all the different perspectives and how it impacts people differently, so that people are really looking for, I think, a better world. And I think most people are looking to organizations now, younger people, to take better care of them and appreciate their efforts more, and are feeling probably underappreciated. So there is this desire for working for a company that does good, buying brands that are purpose driven. I know that there's tons of data that supports, millennials and Gen Z would support brands that are purpose driven over other brands. So I think that just leaks across all areas of the market. Like, this speaker is also tied to a foundation, and this person is doing this work as basically the head of their nonprofit, and the speaking funds that. So in some sense, there's that direct crossover. But in general, I think to your question, like it's just all areas of the market, like purpose-driven messaging, brand messaging that are socially conscious or that are giving back. It's been a incentive adder to buyers, and so it's the same in our industry, and the same that while there's backlash over here on certain topics, like the trends in the workplace and the trends in the population and the overall actual societal trends are not changing and are not going away.
Mhm.
And bigger than any of the, minute differences between us as people, identity wise, like race and gender and everything else, it is going to be age, because the age gap is growing. We know more people in the world are going to be over 50 than any other population. More people are going to be working later because retirement age is going to continue to grow, and people's ability to retire is going to continue to change. And so how do we, like the new generations, also learn and appreciate the older generations and not think that they're all just outdated and backwards and anti-progressive and all of the things. So I think there's a lot of work to be done in that sense, but I think that's what people want. And I'm hoping that leaders are taking that to heart. It seems like that's where we're going. And I think, my clients at least represent a lot of that messaging and help leaders, become better, because people feel cared for. Like you don't have to worry about attrition as much, but we're so driven by the bottom line that a lot of companies have lost touch with, how to be human in ways.
Yeah. Um, Actually, I'm kind of wondering, because this taps on the next question really well. Like, why should companies invest more in speaking talent? What's the benefit that you really kind of not only pitch to maybe the people that you talk with, that are clients that you coach, but how do you what would you say for like companies, like the biggest reason
Yeah.
they should invest more?
Yeah, I mean, definitely like having a keynote speaker at your event, or just coming in, whether or not you have them do workshops, which obviously can be very practical and can really move the needle and things, or whether you just engage them around a keynote, there is a huge effect of having third-party validation. So if you're a leader and you want to reinforce either ideas that you have or new initiatives that you're rolling out, bringing in a speaker is one of like the best investments as far as to drive that change forward. It obviously can have an impact on culture in a lot of different ways, depending on what the topic area is and how that may, move or inspire. So I feel like the investment for companies can vary. A lot of times it's for the sales team, so they are learning new tactics or getting new ways to, bolster confidence, and hopefully that can lead to direct results in all of this. But the truth is, it's kind of hard to measure the ROI of a keynote. And obviously we've tried in the industry, and lots of different people have done a lot of different things to demonstrate the value. But I think kind of what I've shared, it's like you get this third party validation on top of the expertise. You're demonstrating like that you're investing in it's not just for the leadership team, it's something for everyone. It can be like a gift to your your colleagues and your employees.
Mhm.
So, or however the context is. So yeah, I think those are a few of the things. But yeah, I think overall, like the same reasons people hire keynotes for anything, it's the same reasons like, companies will be able to hopefully turn that into something more. But a lot of times the keynote's not enough. A lot of times the keynote is just, the spark, and they need to either be really committed to driving that change forward or driving something new forward, or that's where the opportunity is for speakers to continue a relationship and can to grow, what they can offer that particular organization.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a good thing to note, though. Really, because that third party validation is not something that I was formally considering, but that is great. That if you do have initiatives, yes, the continued success is on you, the organization, in order to carry it through. But if that can be a catalyst, if it can reinforce, but does that open up further relationship with that speaker? But that's neat. Well, those are all the hard questions. I only have one last one. It seems pretty easy. I saw that you like board games, and I just want to know your favorite.
Yeah, and I'm glad I saw this question because I'm like, wow, this is the hardest question in this entire list. Like I've been playing a lot of Monopoly Go on my phone, and I love so classic Monopoly is always a good one because I love all these derivative games that are around I grew up with like Mall Madness and Bargain Hunter and anything that's like just purely absurd because you're just shopping on a game, or it's capitalism, it's real estate. Like I like those games. I think they're fun. I just bought a game called Executive Decision on Etsy that's from the 70s, and it's called the Business Management Game. And as an MBA, I'm like really excited and nerdy to play it, and I'm sure it's really ridiculous, but yeah, I guess I'll go with Monopoly as the classic board game. But I'd play any that you put in front of me.
Yeah, I wonder what maybe dated things are going to be within that game from the 70s.
Exactly. That's what I'm excited about. It's like annual salary of $10,000.
And a family of 4.
Yeah. But they own a home, so they're doing fine.
Yeah. And then Monopoly, I appreciate that. Wait, does that ever cause any arguments? Is that, or is it always just a good clean game?
Everyone thinks that I'm like this, I love playing games, but I'm really not like super competitive or a sore loser because I really just like playing the games. Like if I do well, then great. But I think because I want people to play with me again, I've learned from a young age to not be like that.
Yeah.
So other people maybe for sure, but not me. But last time I think I played like one-on-one Monopoly. My husband and I played Baconopoly, and he won. So that's fair and square. He won the bacon.
There you go. Yeah. I know. I take that same approach because you do want to have that next game, hopefully, of just, yeah, you win, you lose, you lose. I am not very good at Catan, but I'll keep playing and maybe one day I'll get
same. I always feel like I get off on the wrong foot there, but I love it. I love that too. I wasn't sure if that's a board game or not. Now there's all these card and other types of formats, but I like them all.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for answering that question.
No worries.
Well, cool. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciated all your answers. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's great to chat with you, and I hope it's been valuable for the audience. You guys can check me out at bbncreativemanagement.com and set up a free 30-minute call. I'm sure I can help you figure out, some next best steps. And otherwise, find me on LinkedIn or shoot me a message wherever.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been another episode of Mix and Matchbox. I am your host, Brent Feldman. We'll be back soon with more content. Please like and subscribe. Thank you.